Well, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to call this hearing to order. I want to begin today by welcoming our witness here, Shaylin Bott, the Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, previously the Secretary of Transportation for Colorado, and, as I recall, for a small state on the East Coast, Delaware. So it's nice to see you again. This is Administrator Bott's third time appearing before this committee since he was nominated by President Biden for this job, and we're grateful both for his willingness to serve our Federal Highway Administrator as our Federal Highway Administrator, and also for joining us today. Federal Highway Administration, as we know, and the work that it does to strengthen our world-class highway system is essential to ensuring that both people and goods can get where they need to go when they need to get there. As we all know, today's hearing is an opportunity for our committee to conduct oversight as well of the Federal Highway Administration's fiscal year 2025 budget request, as well as the administration's implementation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was created in large part in this room, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Together, these laws will enable the Federal Highway Administration to make once-in-a-generation investments in our nation's roads, our nation's highways, and our nation's bridges. I want to begin today with a few words about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. As I've said before, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law represents the single largest investment in our nation's roads and bridges since the construction of the interstate highway system. And its enactment was due in large part to the hard-working members of this committee, many of who are going to be here in this room throughout the morning. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is already having a transformative impact across our country. According to the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, since the enactment of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, more than $128 billion, with a B, $128 billion in highway and bridge formula funds from this law have been used to support more than 70,000 new projects across America. 70,000 new projects across America. For example, in Delaware, we're using bipartisan infrastructure law funds to address congestion and safety at the I-95 and 895 interchanges in northern Delaware, Newcastle County. In Arkansas, the city of West Memphis is restoring hundreds of acres of floodplain along the Mississippi River's banks to protect major transportation routes. And in Arizona, the other end of our country, that state is installing new protections to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions while increasing habitat connectivity for local species. And these projects aren't just rebuilding our roads and our bridges, they're creating literally tens of thousands of good-paying jobs across our country. For example, according to the White House, the highway, the street, and bridge construction industry added an average of 2,800 jobs per month in 2023, which is 4 times the amount of jobs the industry was adding per month between 2011 and 2019. To date, over 15.5 million jobs have been created in our country since President Biden took office. That sounds like a lot of jobs, but to put it in context, that's more than the combined populations of Delaware, Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, and West Virginia combined. It seems like a lot of jobs. It is a lot of jobs. As our colleagues will recall, in addition to the investments that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is making to the Federal Highway Administration, the Inflation Reduction Act created 3 new programs at that agency. These new programs are helping to reconnect communities and neighborhoods while promoting use of lower carbon construction materials, as well as providing resources to help expedite the environmental review process for transportation projects. And while we've made progress toward rebuilding our nation's infrastructure over the last several years, there's no shortage of challenges ahead for the Federal Highway Administration. The collapse of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge on March 26 was a terrible, terrible tragedy. As we all know, 6 people lost their lives, and thousands more have had their daily lives upended by the loss of a critical highway link across the Baltimore harbor. President Biden is committed to helping the people of Baltimore rebuild the bridge, and the Federal Highway Administration already has been and will continue to be a key leader in the recovery efforts. As the recovery efforts continue, I hope that the Federal Highway Administration will continue to work closely with us in the Congress and the other relevant federal agencies, as well as state and local leaders, to rebuild the bridge. This is a shared responsibility. And as climate change continues to impact our communities across America and our infrastructure, the Federal Highway Administration has an important role to play in reducing emissions from our transportation sector, while improving the resilience of our transportation systems. Fortunately, through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress has given the agency additional tools to address climate change. I'm proud that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law included the first ever climate title of any surface transportation law, and that the FY25 budget builds on this effort. As part of the climate title, Congress created the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, also known as NEVI, programs which provide $7.5 billion to states for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. $7.5 billion to states for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. But creating the NEVI program was just the first step. Accelerating the pace of installing EV chargers will require close partnership between the Federal Highway Administration and state departments of transportation throughout our country. In the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress created the Low Carbon Transportation Materials Grant Program to incentivize the use of lower-emitting construction materials on highway projects. Through this grant program, states can obtain funding to support cleaner construction materials that will reduce our nation's greenhouse gas emissions. It's also crucial that the Federal Highway Administration use all of the tools and the resources provided by us, by the Congress, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to address the challenges of highway congestion and resulting supply chain bottlenecks. In addition to impacting the commutes of many Americans, bottlenecks can add up to a higher cost of doing business and result in significant environmental costs as well. Lastly, making our roads safer for all Americans is an ongoing challenge for the Federal Highway Administration. Thankfully, since the enactment of Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we have started to see the number of roadway fatalities begin to decline after increasing for years. I'm going to say that again, some good news here. We haven't had this good news for a while on this front, but thankfully, since the enactment of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we've started to see the number of highway fatalities begin to decline after increasing for years. I think we'd all agree that's a very good thing. To continue this progress, though, the agency must continue work with states and communities to plan roadway designs that are safe for all users, Federal Highway Administration's fiscal 2025 budget will help ensure the agency has the resources it needs to tackle challenges like these as it continues to modernize our nation's roads, our nation's highways, and our nation's bridges. And as we approach the third anniversary of the enactment of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the second anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act later this year, it's important for us to take stock of the progress that's been made and the work that lies ahead. Today's hearing will provide us with an opportunity to do just that. Our ranking member, Senator Capito, will be joining us later in the hearing and will not be making an opening statement. At this time, she's well represented by his folks over my right shoulder, who are a great part of our EPW team. But anyway, we're now going to hear from our hearing. Administrator Bott, I've already mentioned a couple of aspects of your resume and your vita, and a number of major roles. I don't know, a lot of people have been Secretary of Transportation for two states, in this case Colorado and Delaware, but you've also been, in addition to being the head of Federal Highway Administration, you've also had some other major roles. Mention a couple of those for us before we get into your hearing and your testimony, just a couple of other major roles that you've played in the last 10, 15 years in Ohio. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I was also the Deputy Executive Director with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. I was the President and CEO of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, ITS America, and I also was in the private sector with AECOM as a Global Senior Vice President for Transportation Innovation and Alternative Project Delivery.
When Delaware was a little state, and you tend to get to know people pretty well, and I've had the opportunity to meet Shailen's wife and family, and I just asked you to convey to her our thanks for sharing you with all of us. And so with that, you may proceed with your testimony. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Carper, and if Ranking Member Capito is, I know she's going to join. Members of the committee, want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I believe that a transportation agency exists for two reasons: to save lives and to make people's lives better. The historic funding provided by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act is enabling projects that will do just that. FHWA has continued to make significant progress in advancing new programs and funding projects to improve safety, reduce bottlenecks, and make our infrastructure more resilient. The President's budget request for FHWA builds on this and will enable continued progress. One example that is emblematic of FHWA's progress is the Ben Spence Bridge. When I was a college student, I used to drive across that bridge, and I remember thinking it was very old. While serving at KYTC, funding for the bridge seemed decades away. During the Obama administration, I served at FHWA, and I remember the Ohio delegation highlighting the funding needs, but we were unable to move it forward. But now we announced a grant award for the rehabilitation and reconstruction of that bridge in 2023 and completed the environmental review last month. And this bridge is no longer a decades-away dream, but it is a reality. There are tens of thousands of
Tell us, this bridge connects what point to what point?
It's from Covington, Kentucky into Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, great, thanks. I think I've been on that bridge. Thank you.
Many people have 3% of the nation's GDP carried on it. And these projects are becoming a reality thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The backdrop to all project delivery remains safety. I've spent my career working to make our roadways safer. Although we have seen some signs for cautious optimism, based on recent data, roadway fatalities, particularly among vulnerable road users, remain stubbornly high. The investments we are making will be critical to saving lives, and we need to build on. I just want to ask, do you want me to yield or continue? Okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. And harness technology to get to our goal of zero deaths, not decades from now, but much, much sooner. I have always believed in our ability to achieve transformation through transportation. I was pleased to witness this in action recently in Delaware at the renaming of the Newark Regional Transportation Center as the Thomas R. Carper Train Station. This train station was transformed from a former automotive plant into a multimodal passenger rail station. Although not a highway project, there are countless examples of similar transformation happening with infrastructure across the country. Thank you, Senator Carper, for being a transformational leader and a true champion for transportation. One area of transformation is our progress towards a national EV charging network. Since the President took office, the number of publicly available charging ports has grown by over 90%, with over 183,000 publicly available EV charging ports across the country. Our programs are accelerating private sector investment that puts us on track to deploy 500,000 charging ports ahead of schedule. EV charging stations funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law have opened in several states, with more states expected to come online soon. I want to recognize this committee for helping enact the first surface transportation bill to include a climate title. In April, FHWA announced nearly $830 million in grants from the discretionary program known as PROTECT to help communities strengthen transportation infrastructure. Last month, I was in Philadelphia to celebrate a $14 million PROTECT award. I met a potential future FHWA administrator, an 8-year-old boy who came to visit the project with his mom on his bicycle. He and I had an opportunity to sit down and discuss it. His enthusiasm not only filled me with great hope for the future, but our conversation was a reminder that projects that are occurring today will have positive effects for generations. Our transportation system was primarily designed and built in the 20th century. It was not designed to handle the climate impacts we are seeing today. Since January of 2021, FHWA has made available over $3.5 billion in emergency relief program funding for climate-related events. I have witnessed this firsthand, holding leadership positions in 3 states during my transportation career. The increased frequency with which these impacts are occurring highlight the significance of the ER program and the financial strain that it is currently under. While not climate-related, the most visible recent ER event is the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and I want to highlight the efforts of FHWA staff, Maryland DOT, City of Baltimore, Army Corps, Coast Guard, and private sectors, companies who are supporting the response. I also want to thank the emergency responders who acted quickly to save lives and not lose sight of the families of the 6 people who lost their lives working on the bridge that night. I've dealt with a number of bridge-related incidents during my career. I've never seen something at that scale. While it is a monumental task to clean up the site and rebuild the bridge, the coordinated response by government and industry gives me great optimism. During my remaining tenure as administrator, I will continue to endeavor to ensure that FHWA serves as a positive example to the American people. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that testimony. We've been joined by Senator Capito, who's come from another important engagement. And I don't know, she's welcome to share with us a little bit about that, if you would. Go ahead.
Well, I told the administrator I would be a little late and the chairman, but as a proud grandmother of 8, my oldest grandchild had her little 8th grade graduation this morning, and she gave a 2.5-minute tribute to one of the teachers. And you met a future administrator. I saw a future senator today. So thank you for that.
So you certainly picked the right family to be a part of. As a West Virginian native, I know the Capito family has great history. Let me just start off, if I could, with a question, Administrator Bott, regarding the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I want to, it's anticipated that federal funds to rebuild the bridge will come out of the Federal Highway Administration's emergency relief program. It's also anticipated that state insurance proceeds and other potential legal judgments or settlements against the responsible parties will be used to reimburse the federal government for the use of emergency relief funds. Could you just take a minute or two and speak a bit more about the role that insurance proceeds and other claims will play in paying for the bridge replacement?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. Yes, we have been working since the early hours of the tragic incident with Maryland DOT, both on the disaster recovery and then turning increasingly to the rebuilding of the bridge. I know this issue has been important for this committee. I spoke about it at another hearing last month. The president is also very engaged, Secretary Buttigieg as well, specifically around the $350 million insurance payment. ER, as it is written, the ER relief program, does require the Federal Highway Administration to make sure that states are making every effort to recover insurance funds and others to reimburse the program. So we are working closely, particularly our lawyers are looking closely at the insurance policy, what is written, just as if you had a home insurance policy. They don't just hand you a check. There are, things that are required in it. So we are grateful that they will make that funding available, but we just want to make sure that we're not skipping any steps as we analyze what's in there.
Thank you. According to the most recent information shared with my office, with our office, Federal Highway Administration's emergency relief backing currently stands at, I think, at about $3.5 billion. My question is, how does the current emergency relief program backlog affect the ability of the program to help states deliver projects that are currently in the pipeline?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. So I'm going to use round numbers because it's easier for my math, but there's about $4.4 billion in ER requests that are out there now. We have about $850 million in available ER funding. So just for ease, I'm going to say there's about $3.5 billion in unmet needs for the ER program. $1.5 billion of that is what we have tagged right now for the FSK bridge rebuild. The other $2 billion are from states across the country, from various fires and floods and other events that have impacted states from California to Tennessee.
You may have already answered this question, but if you have, maybe you can expand on it. But do you anticipate that additional funding will be needed to address the backlog for fiscal years 2024 and 2025?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, absolutely. That I think it's about $100 million a year that it comes through the appropriation process to top up the ER funds, and obviously that is not consistent with what the unmet need is now.
Good. There's a front page article yesterday on the New York Times that some of you may have read, reporting that electric vehicles with a range of more than 300 miles are now becoming more affordable for American consumers. And that's, I think, welcome news that we should all be excited about. However, I remain concerned about the pace by which EV charging infrastructure is being installed across America. As the market for affordable EVs grow, it's critical that drivers have convenient and accessible places to charge them. Some states are doing a good job of using the federal monies and getting this work underway. Some are not, and I'm going to explore with Senator Capito later, maybe later this week, the idea of having a hearing, inviting folks from states that are doing a good job of leveraging the funds that we provided through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and maybe some states that could do a lot better, see what they can learn. But here's my question. I want to be interested in hearing more about what the Federal Highway Administration is doing to work with states to accelerate the installation of EV charging infrastructure. What are the current challenges and what more could be done to move more quickly? Bless you. Bless you twice. All right. How often do you hear the chair of a committee bless a member of the committee when they see it's not fair? Not every day. But in this committee, we're very bipartisan.
Well, thank you.
Go right
Chairman.
ahead.
And when I went to school in Kentucky, people said, "Bless my heart" to me a lot. And so as long as you don't say that to her, then you're in good shape. Yeah, specifically on the EV chargers, I mean, I am a project delivery person, and since I became the administrator 18 months ago, I have taken a project delivery approach to this. We work closely with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation that has been set up. We are working with every single state. And so, look, the president's goal is 500,000 charging ports by the end of the decade. We believe we are on track to hit that goal. I would prefer that there were thousands of chargers.
Say that number again. The goal is
500,000 charging ports is the goal that the president has set by the end of the decade. There's about 183,000 out there available now. The vast majority of those are private sector. There are 6 states that have NEVI-funded chargers that are out the door now. And again, people say, well, that's only 6 chargers. It's actually dozens of charging ports. And I would say that we are on track. Every state has submitted their plan. There are several states that already have NEVI funding chargers out there. We're on track for thousands more charging ports to become available this year, and we will hit that target. But just like it's going to take about 4 years to rebuild the bridge, we anticipated the bulk of chargers coming online in 2024, 2025, 2026. And if you look at the delivery schedule that is out there now for virtually every state, we're on target to hit that place. I'm not happy about the fact that we are, about, I would say, months behind where we were, but with the amount of work that was needed to get that program stood up, we want to continue to work with every single state to accelerate their delivery.
good. All right, thanks very much for your response. Senator Capito, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
congratulations to your granddaughter.
Thank you very much, Chairman Carper. And I have an opening statement that I'll allude to, but I'll in the interest of time and other members' time, I will not give that and go straight to questioning. So thank you for being here. I want to ask you a specific West Virginia question to begin, and this is on Quarter H. Quarter H, which is the state of West Virginia's highest priority highway project. It's a section of construction was delayed another year when FHWA declared the section from Wardensville to the Virginia state line as a major project, requiring additional documentation. Given that the $500 million statutory threshold for major project, why did the FHWA declare this project, estimated at $475 million, a major project? Why did you go beyond what the scope of is the $500 million threshold? Million threshold.
Yeah, thank you, Ranking Member. And I fully understand your urgency on getting this project delivered. I look forward to visiting with you hopefully
you.
in the next month or so. I specifically asked our division, why was this redesignated as a major project? And the answer was, given that the construction cost estimate had gone to $475 million, with all the pre-construction activities, design, right-of-way, and others, they felt that it would go over the $500 million threshold. And it is not the first time that we have used proximity to $500 million as a reason for redesignation. Illinois had another project that did happen on.
Okay, so then, so you use the discretion there, because this does impact additional documentation and review. So, and it slows the project, which is already a project that, by the way, has been on the books for probably 50 years. So what factors does the agency use to determine when to designate these $500 million? So you mentioned other costs that you thought, but you couldn't quite quantify that to push it up over the 500. What other aspects do you use to, when you do this, when you push our project and the Illinois project up to the major project listing?
So my understanding, Ranking Member, and I'm happy to follow up on this on specifics, but the $500 million threshold is all costs of the project. So there's your construction costs, there's design, utility relocation, right-of-way, that you would acquire as part of that. So that's where the $500 million is. And then there's also, is it a particularly complex or complicated project is another threshold that they can apply. But what I would also say that I don't know about it adding another year. What it does also allow us to do is provide cost and schedule assistance for West Virginia. So I have directed our division staff to make sure that they are providing every possible piece of assistance to West Virginia on this project.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a very complicated piece of highway through a beautiful part of our state. It's very expensive to build where it is. And if we get to the Virginia line, we're hoping that the Virginians then will take it over to 81 so we can have a full shot into the center of the state. Let me ask you about one federal decision. I mean, I touted it when we passed the bill as being such a great aspect in terms of permitting. And when you were here, we were provided with information in March regarding the use of one federal decision provision for major projects, and you had 8 that were using that provision at the time. Have there been any other projects added to that number, to that list?
Ranking Member, thank you for that question. I will need to come back and
Okay.
follow up. Have any more been added?
Okay, and then it's most of these original 8 projects have either been delayed or had their timeline extended. So we're trying to shorten the time here, and it seems like we're not really achieving the goal. So what kind of accountability, because you're supposed to be the coordinating for all the other agencies, Fish and Wildlife and others that are involved in this permitting for major projects, what kind of accountability do the other agencies have to you when you're trying to achieve this one federal decision? And what's your opinion of whether one federal decision actually works? Because as a state administrator, you would have welcomed this news to say this is going to be great, and I'm sure you think it is great, but is it really working?
Thank you, Ranking Member Capito. Yes, when I sat on the state DOT side, I welcomed any and all opportunities to accelerate project delivery.
Right.
And I just want to be careful how I phrase this. When you say that we have the authority, I think we work with our sister agencies who issue the permits. We don't issue permits. We're the coordinating agency trying to get across the finish line.
Yeah, but there are mandated timelines within this. Do you oversee those with the other agencies?
Yes, we clearly and we are often in meetings with our permitting agencies around the various and sundry issues, whether it's the FSK Bridge, the Cape Cod bridges, all of the just sort of thornier projects that require permitting. And I will get a specific answer as to like how we hold them to account, or if that's the proper term.
But are you finding that it's shortening the timeline? Is it achieving its goal?
Senator, I would say that I feel that we are making progress on trying to hit timelines. It is the reason that these projects take a long time. There are issues around Fish and Wildlife. That Fish and Wildlife, as part of their mandate, they do need to make sure that wildlife is protected. That the Army Corps of Engineer is looking at issues like the right whale that uses the Cape Cod Canal is not impacted by the construction around that project. And so I would say yes, they share a desire to move them properly, but we don't want them to be in a position where they're shortcutting what they need to get done.
So I would say more directly, the answer is no, it's really not working quite the way we had envisioned it. Not that we don't have goals to see that work. So whatever we can do to help with that process, because we use this as a template for other permitting legislation. And if it's not working here like we had in the IIJA 2 or 3 years ago, aspirations are great, but you're talking time and money here and significant impact. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Thank you. Senator Garden, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. Administrator Batt, I want to talk about what happened 72 days ago when the Dolly struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's now predicted to be, by the Lloyd's of London, the largest maritime liability claim in history. The Port of Baltimore was closed. 6 lives were lost. A major artery on the east coast of the United States was closed. I want to thank you for your immediate help, the coordinated campaign, the unified command. You were part of that and were instrumental in mitigating the damage and loss of life and saving costs and helping businesses deal with the challenges by the Key Bridge being destroyed. The port is now opened, thanks to the work of the Unified Command, and we thank the federal partners that made that possible. The bridge handled 34,000 vehicles a day. As a result of it being closed, we've seen an 18% increase in the tunnel traffic, which is added to the delays of going through the 2 tunnels that go through the harbor. For those that have hazardous material, those truckers have to travel an additional 25 miles at a heavy cost to commerce in our community. So there is an urgency in getting the bridge replaced. The emergency relief funds have been extremely helpful, and we thank the administration for releasing those funds to deal with emergency repairs. But there's a difference at 100%, which we appreciate that. The challenge is that the replacement bridge, we need to have legislation passed in order for the 100% federal share to be provided. We're on day 72. It took only a matter of days after the Minnesota bridge was destroyed for Congress to act and make it clear that they would be there with 100% federal funds. So my first question to you is, does the administration support the urgency of passing legislation making it clear that the replacement bridge will be at 100% federal funds?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your leadership in this matter. I would say that, yes, the President has been very clear that he wants 100% funding for the bridge.
I just point out about the urgency here. On May 31st, the Maryland Department of Transportation requested proposals for the replacement bridge. They're expecting that by the late summer, early fall, to be able to announce the project team for the project, which means we're going to need federal funds for the replacement bridge this year. So I just really want to underscore the urgency of getting the legislation passed. We don't have that many vehicles that make it to the finish line. We were unsuccessful in getting in the federal FAA reauthorization, which was transportation related. We have to look for an opportunity to get this done. I want to make one other point clear, if I might, and that is what Title 23 provides. And I'm quoting from it. Any compensation for damages or insurance proceeds, including interest recovered by the state or political subdivision or by a toll authority for repair of the highway facilities, must be used upon receipt to reduce the ER fund liability on that project. In your conversations with the state of Maryland, do they fully understand that all recoveries related to the destruction of the bridge needs to go to the ER fund?
Senator, yes, I would say they are crystal clear that any of the funds that are recovered through their legal efforts that, and again, I defer to DOJ on the legal settlements, but any funds that they recover would first have to come back to the ER fund.
And in fact, when we've had similar circumstances like this, there was one case in the state of Washington, a substantial amount of the cost was reimbursed to the ER funds as a result of third-party recoveries, either insurance or liability claims.
Yes, sir. The Skagit Bridge was a $20 million repair cost. $17 million was recovered through insurance and went back to ER.
And the last point I want to bring up deals with the use of toll facilities. Title 23 provides for the use of toll facilities on roads that use the ER funds, provided that none of the toll dollars are being used in regards to the cost paid for by the federal government. Is that, are you, or similar, that you can't use, the toll can only be used for expenses unrelated to the replacement of the bridge. In your conversations with the state of Maryland, are you confident that they will comply with Title 23?
Senator, just to clarify, I believe what you are saying is what is consistent, which is that now that the bridge has been federalized through the use of ER funds, any tolls that are used in the future will have to be used for Title 23 purposes, and Maryland has committed to doing that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. The next person in line to ask questions is Senator Kramer. Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being here. I'm going to start with, it might not surprise you, I've repeatedly raised concerns over the legality and impracticality of the, and the nature really of the FHWA's greenhouse gas emissions rule over this past couple of years. And since the last time you were before us, not one but two federal courts have agreed and said that this was an unlawful rule. Following those two rulings, the United States Senate passed my Congressional Review Act resolution with 53 votes, which means, you know, it was bipartisan, a resolution supporting that position. And yet, I see that that you all have appealed the decision of the courts and are continue to pursue this unlawful rule as though you have a license to do something that that Congress has not given you. What's the point of wasting taxpayer dollars and time and resources on a rule that's so clearly illegal?
Thank you, Senator, and you have been very consistent in your statements on this, and I would say that I would like to share that consistency on my side. I have always said that we will comply with the law. When the courts reached their decision, we told states that we would not be you know, requiring them to meet the schedule because of the legal decisions that have been made. I'm going to defer to DOJ. They are the ones who are, you know, in charge of appeals and other things, and we'll just continue to follow the law.
You know, since you brought that up, that you know, defer to the DOJ, which I know you have to do. That's another whole frustration of mine, is that the client of the Department of Justice no longer has any authority over the Department of Justice's decisions on your own behalf. That's Congress did that back in the, I think, 60s, and it was one of the great mistakes that we should correct someday, because I have found it very frustrating. Well, I can't wait for the Chevron doctrine to be overturned, along with, and grateful to the court in West Virginia versus EPA using the major questions doctrine, which I believe this is a violation of, by the way. And in fact, anyway, so the idea that you now, as the quote client of this law firm called the Department of Justice, but have nothing to say about an appeal is disgusting to me. And we should break that up. At any rate, given the fact that the Supreme Court has issued rulings previously that are not dissimilar to this, using the major questions doctrine, at what point does an agency just follow all of that precedent rather than trying to make it up as it goes in violation of what is so clear, I think, to most people?
So, Senator, I'm not trying to be evasive.
Yeah,
I'm trying to
It's probably, yeah, it's a tough one for you to answer. I get it. I'm just saying, you don't get to make stuff up and issue the rule and then wait for the Supreme Court of the United States or some other appeal process to finish off before you say, okay, well, we'll go by the law again now. The law, to me, was crystal clear, is crystal clear, as it, by the way, was the intent of Congress in the CRA. Anyway, all of that said, I want to move on to my other favorite topic that you and I have been consistent about, and that's, of course, formula funding and the importance of it. It was my highest priority in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I was grateful for the 90-10 formula funding formula. But I've been hearing, and I'm going to ask you to verify whether this is true or not, but I've been hearing that on the grant side, the discretionary side, money has not been going out very fast, that in fact it could be even manipulating or confusing the formula a little bit. So I want you to either verify or deny that that's the case, and just maybe advocate for moving more money out of discretionary into formula if in fact there's a problem. Because one thing about the states, they get their money out really, really fast, as you know. You've done it a couple of times yourself. Anyway, first of all, is that a correct assumption that I'm making about the grant funding, or is my information not accurate? And second of all, what do you think about putting more of it in formula?
Senator, thank you for that question. And I believe the states have done a great job of getting formula dollars obligated and out the door, and the chairman talked about all the great projects that are out there. Project delivery, and I'm less interested in giving out money. I'm more interested in delivering projects. Sure. And so we have about 2,250 discretionary grant agreements that we are working on from money that we've awarded, and about 50% of those now, which is greatly up from when I started, have now signed grant agreements. So we want to turn all of these projects into successful ribbon cuttings, and I commit to continuing to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Been joined by Senator Padilla. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
All is well. All is well.
Good.
Well, thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you for the opportunity to highlight one of the elements of the fiscal year 24 spending package. It included a bill that I put forward on a bipartisan basis known as the EVAC Planning Act, which directs the Department of Transportation and FEMA to develop best practices around emergency evacuation routes for states, territories, tribal governments, and local governments to utilize when conducting transportation infrastructure planning. So even in the planning phase, we have to be mindful of evacuation routes, and it comes from experience, tragic experience. In California, we've seen people literally die in their cars trying to escape wildfires, for example, because there was simply not sufficient or adequate evacuation routes or capacity along evacuation routes. So this planning work can literally mean the difference between life and death. Administrator Beck, will you commit to working with the Department of Transportation and FEMA to develop and publish the guidance as expeditiously as possible?
Thank you, Senator. And yes, I have seen many of the tragic stories, particularly in the wildfires, of people perishing, and California is experiencing a number of these tragedies. We are working with FEMA already. The planning is incredibly important, and I appreciate your support in this area.
Absolutely. So thank you for that commitment. But while these recommendations will help communities improve disaster preparedness and evacuation capacity, dedicated funding to implement them at the local level still remains critical. Currently, one of the only dedicated federal funding sources available for evacuation route projects is through a small set-aside under the Highway Administration's Protect Grant program. Unfortunately, this program had its funding cut in fiscal year 24, which is why I've been leading a number of our colleagues to urge appropriators to restore funding in the fiscal year 25 plan and to increase the evacuation route set-aside. Follow-up question for you, Mr. Administrator. How can the Highway Administration expand its involvement in this area, and what additional resources would be helpful as Congress begins to negotiate the spending plan for the next fiscal year?
Thank you, Senator. Again, I think we just released the $830 million in Protect discretionary, and there are some evacuation routes that are in there. We work closely with state DOTs. Obviously, safety is our number one priority, and making sure whether it's evacuation routes for fires, for floods, for hurricanes, this is going to be a key priority, and welcome any additional resources that are made available.
All right, thank you. And while we're on the topic, any initial ideas or suggestions as we're also looking ahead to the next surface transportation reauthorization bill?
Yeah, I thank you, Senator. I always believe in making data-driven decisions, and so it would be great for us to begin collecting data around what are primary evacuation routes, how are they performing in these situations. How resilient are they? Are there any culverts, for example, that might wash out due to heavy rain, and we need to prioritize those? We actually started that in Colorado when I was there around sort of a risk-based prioritization practice. So those are just some initial thoughts, but happy to work with your staff.
I know one example that still sticks in my mind is the image of one fallen tree in the wrong place on the rim of Lake Tahoe can really cause a lot of havoc as a ripple effect. Again, just one example of many. In my time remaining, I also wanted to thank you for the significant investments that your agency has made in heavy-duty vehicle infrastructure under the first round of the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program. I also wanted to thank you for your efforts to better coordinate with the Department of Energy through the Joint Office on Vehicles to build out the necessary heavy-duty charging infrastructure along high-priority corridors. But I am concerned that the recent NOFO only makes heavy-duty infrastructure eligible that is fully open to the public without also including infrastructure that is open to operators for more than one company. I think the latter eligibility supports projects that provide fleet operators of all sizes with the assurances that there will be reliable infrastructure access, especially in the early years of this transition to zero-emission technologies. So will you consider an amendment to the definition in this NOFO to ensure that heavy-duty commercial charging depot projects or projects that include elements that are for shared fleet charging can be eligible under this round?
Thank you, Senator. Happy to take any of that feedback. I mean, this is one of the challenges. Title 23 requires full public access, but for commercial operators, it's that presents different challenges. So we're going to work with the Joint Office to incorporate all of that feedback.
I just think, and we've seen it in with other technologies before, that these fleets provide great opportunity on the earlier stages for that scaling up and reaching the cost efficiencies that we're striving for. So we'll continue to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Earl, you're welcome. Thank you so much for your questions and for your presence. Earlier this morning, we were talking about some encouraging data with respect to safety, accidents, deaths, and injuries, and so forth. For the first time after seeing them just continue to climb and climb, it's the numbers are looking better. This morning in California, there's a bicycle charity event that's taking place with hundreds, maybe thousands of people riding their bicycles from, I think, from San Francisco down to LA, one of whom is our oldest son. And so the idea of safety, including not just cars, trucks, vans, but also bicycles is on my mind. So, yeah, Earl, wish him well, along with all the others. Thank you so much. And with that, Senator Ricketts, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, for having this hearing. Mr. Abbott, great to see you again. Thank you for you and your team's coordination and responsiveness to the Nebraska Department of Transportation and my staff as we've been working together. I very much appreciate that. It's been more than 2 years now since the IIJA implementation, and inflation, we were talking about this earlier, I think with Senator Capito. You used inflation, labor costs, all that to justify part of the reason to make that a major project over the $500 million. So that's something we continue to see rise, material costs and so forth. And so the purchasing power of the bill is diminishing every day that goes by. So encourage the administration to, instead of pushing progressive policies that didn't make it into law, to really work on getting the IIJA grant agreements done and signed for critical infrastructure projects that we don't want them to have them delayed anymore. So continue to encourage you to work to implement these programs the way the Congress intended and to have them carried out to meet our pressing infrastructure needs. Mr. Abbott, we talked last time about the August redistribution last year. Last year, the August redistribution was $7.9 billion. This year, we anticipate that amount to climb to $8.7 billion. The Nebraska Department of Transportation continues to be concerned about how they can effectively and efficiently obligate infrastructure dollars in such an impossibly tight time frame. Without the action from Congress, do you expect this number to rise again in the next fiscal year?
Thank you, Senator, and I've actually been working closely with Director Kramer, and there's a lot of response to the storms that have affected your state, so appreciate your leadership in,
Great,
this,
thank you.
in this space. Yes, I mean, August redistribution last year, I had just come on, learned of the $7.9 billion August redistribution. States and cities and others made a heroic effort to get that across the finish line. This year at $8.7 billion, yes, it is a feature now of August redistribution that it continues to climb, and so we're trying to work even earlier each year. But it would be great. I know that our budget proposed a solution for that. I know there's other solutions out there. It would be great to get this resolved.
So is there any way, though, that you can make a dent in this? I mean, so you're saying for fiscal year 25, you think that number, 8.7 billion, that we expect this year is going to go even higher next year? Is that accurate?
Senator, if it doesn't go higher, it's still going to stay in the same vicinity, and that is just a huge number to try to move around at the end of the year. It's not a great way to deliver the program.
Right. Well, we agree on that. And again, frankly, again, 7.9 billion last year, 8.7 billion this year. If you can keep it from going higher next year, that's still a win, right? So the more that you can do with regard to streamlining the permitting process, I know obviously, again, we talked about you don't actually issue those, but working with the other agencies or grantee training, anything you can do to make sure we get those dollars out, so that it just really creates a huge problem when we have that many dollars in such a short time frame. Because the number is so big, are you planning on any additional flexibility for states to help deal with the August redistribution so that state departments of transportation can better optimize their programming of these federal dollars throughout the year?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, we have, again, we've begun earlier than ever reaching out to states, asking them to identify. I mean, one of the problems for states is because of all the resources in bipartisan infrastructure law, they've pushed forward a lot of projects. Normally, every year you would find one that was on the shelf but didn't have funding, and there aren't that many that are sitting on the shelves now. So states are doing, I think, heroic efforts here. We're going to continue to work with them, give them every flexibility they need so that we don't lapse any of that oblum.
Great. I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit. The Nebraska Department of Transportation has been dealing with issues regarding contractor sites with federal and state agencies. They deem that the contractor sites are part of the project and that NDOT, Nebraska Department of Transportation, and Federal Highway may need to account for the impacts or mitigation on those contractor sites. NDOT's understanding from Federal Highway has been that there was no federal nexus to contractor sites and that Federal Highway had an internal memo indicating this. However, recent nationwide programmatic agreements that Federal Highway has negotiated and signed suggests otherwise. Can you provide some clarity on the Federal Highway Administration's opinion regarding contractor sites and federal nexus? Does Federal Highway recognize the issues and burdens that would put on State Department of Transportation on delivering their programs if there was a nexus here? Can you clarify this, please?
Senator, I'm happy to reach out to NDOT or others to just get more information. Happy to get back to you on that.
Okay, so as far you're not familiar directly with this internal memo and which way it goes on contractor sites?
I'm not, Senator, but I'm
Okay.
happy to get up to speed
Great.
and get back to you quickly.
Great, very well. Then we will follow up with you on that. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for those questions. And I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then yield to Senator Capito, who's welcome if she'd like to give her the rest of her opening statement. That'd be fine. Let's talk a little bit about wildlife crossings. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, as we'll recall, Congress directed the Federal Highway Administration to work with federal natural resource agencies to construct wildlife crossings to enable fish passage and to enhance pollinator habitat along our roads. This is because we have heard time again in this committee that conserving wildlife proactively and collaboratively amongst federal agencies, with states, and with other stakeholders has both environmental and economic benefits. The Federal Highway Administration, in particular, should play an active role in this effort since habitat fragmentation, often caused by the development of our roads, is a leading cause of the decline of many species. Here's my question. How is the Federal Highway Administration working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to implement these provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law? And secondly, how does the President's FY FY25 budget continue to support these partnerships with other agencies?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. Specifically on the wildlife crossing initiative, when we installed one when I was the Colorado DOT director, we saw a 90% reduction in wildlife-related crashes on State Highway 9 the year after we opened it. So it's clear that they make a difference. We actually had one in Arizona that was we went to the groundbreaking for here recently. So, but we do rely on Fish and Wildlife for their expertise on, some of the different animals. It's obviously different around the country, specifically on the pollinator program. I know that is certainly something that's a $3 million program within the bipartisan infrastructure law that we are looking, I believe, in winter of this year to award those grants. And that is something that we're going to continue to coordinate with Fish and Wildlife and other agencies on.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one more question, then yield to Senator Kelly, who's just joined us. This is a question regarding VMT pilot program implementation. The bipartisan infrastructure law, as you'll require, directs the U.S. Department of Transportation to create an advisory board on funding alternatives for the Highway Trust Fund in order to undertake a national study of vehicle miles travel user fees. The goal of that work is to produce meaningful data that would provide timely input as Congress considers future revenue sources for the Highway Trust Fund. Nominations for the Federal Systems Funding Alternative Advisory Board were due to the Department of Transportation by October 3rd of last year. It's now been 8 months since those nominations were submitted. Yet the Secretary has not named any members to the advisory board. What is the timeline for naming members to the advisory board so that it can begin the work of getting the national study underway?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chairman. And I know that this is a very important issue for you. I am pleased to report that we have pushed forward the committee recommendations up to the Office of the Secretary, and they're being evaluated now, and hopefully in the very short term, we'll be able to get that pushed out.
Yeah. I'm an old state treasurer, and I became state treasurer of Delaware when I was 29 years old. I could barely spell cash management, and we had the worst credit rating in the country. We weren't very good at paying for things, and when I was governor, we achieved AAA credit ratings and still have that. I'm a person who believes if things are worth having, they're worth paying for, and also that those who use, in this case, our transportation systems, have an obligation to help pay for them. So this is, you're right, this is something I care deeply about. I don't get to stay here for much longer in the United States Senate, about another 7 months, but this is something I will take to the grave with me. That things are worth having, they're worth paying for. All right, let's see, who would be next? Senator Kelly? Senator White, slip in here. Shell, welcome.
Thanks very much.
And then Senator Lummis, looks like Senator Lummis.
I'm chairing another hearing, so I will be dashing out pretty quickly, but I did want to come down and thank Administrator Abbott for coming to Rhode Island to see the Washington Bridge problem that we have. You came on your own, and I appreciate that, on a cold and windy day. And you came back again with Secretary Buttigieg to take a second look with the Secretary. This was a bridge that carries 90,000 vehicles a day. It's a vitally important link from the East Coast mainland up towards Boston, out to Cape Cod and to Points West. It's where 95 and 195 converge, and it carries 195 across the Providence River there. And thanks to an alert inspector who was actually operating pursuant to a transportation grant, they were able to see that this bridge, which is, as you know, of quite unusual construction, had tension members that were holding it up that had basically sheared away, and that the bridge was in fairly immediate danger of collapse. So we've had to close it, and there's been substantial effort to reroute the traffic onto safe parts of the bridge. It's now flowing considerably better after a great deal of work, but the bridge is going to need to be replaced, and it's extremely important to us. We are a small state. This is a bridge that has really important, it's an important piece of our national infrastructure, and we will be pursuing energetically and ardently support from the Highway Administration and from the Department of Transportation, the funds that we're going to need to get that bridge repaired timely and right. And I just look forward to working with you on that, and would love to hear you express some care and enthusiasm for helping us solve the Washington Bridge problem.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I appreciate your leadership on this issue. It was a very cold day the first time we were out there. I actually went up to Boston and toured the Cape Cod bridges just on Monday, and also a project, the Alston project. But I actually chose to travel in through Providence so I could check on the bridge. And as you say, thankfully, the project, the efforts by Rhode Island DOT to widen the lanes there to add some capacity have had an impact. So it's not quite the traffic snarl that was there initially, but I know that's a very important project for you. Commit to energetically and enthusiastically continue to work to get that bridge replaced.
Thank you. We will need funding, and the funding also, I think, needs to take into account the extent to which traffic has been driven through neighborhoods off the bridge, and that has been a significant, air quality and convenience penalty paid by people living nearby in Providence, South Providence, and East Providence, as essentially highway traffic has been rerouted through neighborhoods. So thank you for attention to this. We look forward to working with you and Secretary Buttigieg to a happy conclusion that gets that bridge back in full operations as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks for joining us, especially in view of the other responsibilities you have this morning. Senator Lummis?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
And welcome, Mr. Administrator. I'm going to spend most of my time on two subjects. The first one is the Buy America waiver. I think we all support the Buy America provisions that were recently in legislation. The problem is we don't yet have a reliable domestic source for some products and components. For example, a traffic signal system can include over 200 components, and some of them just aren't manufactured in the U.S. right now. And I think all of us hope that they will be, and that we can find U.S. manufacturers for all of these component parts. But it does create kind of a short-term gap between the rules that you're promulgating and the availability of the products to meet the Buy America standards. So, can you offer assurances today that the FHWA will balance implementation of Buy America requirements with the actual near-term availability of domestic products?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And, I think this is something that the President has been very clear on, that he wants projects delivered as quickly as possible, and he wants to support American manufacturing. And there is obviously tension between those two goals, but we have been directed to deliver projects and to make sure that Buy America is upheld. But my commitment to you is that we will continue to listen, continue to accept feedback from ARTBA, AASHTO, AGC, and others on finding those problematic areas that are holding us up.
Well, and that is the second part of this, of course, is Wyoming DOT plus Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota have all asked for waivers and extensions of time before waivers are disallowed. So before finalizing the rule, would you please confer with state-level officials to ensure any requirements are practical and workable, rather than just saying, we're going to buy America, dang it, whether we have the supplies to implement it or not?
Senator, thank you. We will follow the law when it comes to following the rulemaking process. I would say I've had numerous conversations with a lot of organizations, state DOT leaders. I believe we received 130 comments or so as we move through the rulemaking process. We'll evaluate all of those and take those into account before we make any decisions.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to shift to the cost allocation study. So some time ago, Senator Kelly and I worked together to have a highway cost allocation study, and it's in the 2021 IIJA to complete a cost allocation study for highways. We know how things are changing on our highways. You know, liquid fuel cars have higher gas mileage. There's an increased use of hybrids and electric vehicles, and it's changing their effect on our highway wear and tear, and it's also affecting the Highway Trust Fund. The CBO says, of course, that the Highway Trust Fund will go into insolvency in about 2028, 4 years from now. So since we're coming up on a highway authorization next year, I think, or at least sometime in the next Congress, having this highway cost allocation study would be extremely helpful information, both going into reauth and going into the impending insolvency of the Highway Trust Fund. So my question is this: what's the status now of the cost allocation study?
Senator, I would need to check specifically. We have a lot of reports to Congress that we're working on, but I'm happy to get back to you very quickly on that.
Okay, thank you. And I hope you will get back to me because the bill granted up to 4 years for the study, and it requires a lot of coordination and a lot of moving parts. So I'm curious about whether it will be completed in a timely manner so we can utilize the information during the reauthorization process, and certainly in planning for the kinds of changes that we're going to have to make before 2028 to make the Highway Trust Fund solvent, given the dramatic change in fuel taxes as the main source of the Highway Trust Fund.
Senator, I could not agree more with you, and I will get back to you very quickly on where we are on status of that report.
Okay, thank you. I think that I'm about out of time, so I appreciate your being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
You bet. Thanks for raising that last point in your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Kelly, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet.
Administrator Batt, thank you for being here, and great to see you again. The bipartisan infrastructure law, which passed the Senate nearly 3 years ago now, has allowed FHWA to make historic investments in highway infrastructure across the country. But I continue to hear from small, rural, and disadvantaged communities across Arizona about the barriers that they face to access these new funding resources. And these barriers can range from finding the funding to contribute a local match, to getting technical assistance and grant writing assistance when they're actually applying for the grants. And as this committee starts to think about the next surface transportation bill, I hope we can examine ways to support small, rural, and disadvantaged communities and tribal communities to ensure that the state DOTs, Departments of Transportation, have the resources to help them take advantage of funding opportunities. So, Administrator, can you talk about what actions FHWA has already taken to provide support and technical assistance to help communities apply for discretionary grants, and what guidance have you provided to the state departments of transportation to help them provide support and technical assistance as well?
Thank you, Senator Kelly. And yes, absolutely, we want to make sure that the bipartisan infrastructure law resources don't just flow to traditional recipients such as state DOTs. I know Director Toth, from her time both in the city of Phoenix and now as the director, and I know she shares your concern. We, as Federal Highways, we have division offices in every single state. We're providing technical assistance to local recipients. There's a wonderful lady named Maria Zimmerman at USDOT whose job is to go out and to reach out to people. Sometimes it's even hard to reach out to people where they are, but we're committed to going out, meeting small communities, tribal entities, because we want to make sure that they are successful recipients and deliverers of these projects.
Is any of this stuff that you're doing, this outreach, is it new? Or is it something that's been in place for a number of years?
Some of it we've always done, but obviously it's scaled because of the bipartisan infrastructure law. But particularly under the IRA, there was $100 million that was set aside. To one of the specific outcomes was this technical assistance, and we are using those resources to add new consultation and TA.
Any statutory limitations that you've run into that might make it harder for you to help communities?
Senator, not that I'm aware of off the top of my head, but happy to follow up with your staff if there's anything that we can do to make that better.
Okay. And then in Arizona, our state Department of Transportation established a program called the Arizona Smart Fund, which provides some planning assistance and local match support for cities, towns, and counties that are seeking federal funding. How can FHWA help state DOTs who establish programs to help localities make grant applications more competitive, like this Arizona Smart Fund?
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Appreciate Arizona's leadership in this space. I actually am where I am in my career today because in Kentucky I helped a small town get $200,000 for sidewalks, which might as well have been $200 million because they never would have been able to afford it on their own. And love to reach out to your staff or to Director Toth to figure out how we can scale Arizona's efforts.
Okay, and then on a different subject, on the ROCKS Act. So this is a provision that I helped with that was in the bipartisan infrastructure law. It creates a working group for aggregates like sandstone, gravel, which are, as we all know, literally the building blocks of infrastructure. And this working group would ensure that sufficient sources of aggregates exist here in the United States to support increased demand due to the infrastructure funding. So can you provide an update on what steps have been taken in recent months to stand up the working group to support the ROCKS Act?
Thank you, Senator. And I, as a project delivery person, appreciate your support for obviously these building blocks. I believe we have identified the members of the committee, and I'll get you the specific steps that we've taken in recent months.
All right, thank you. And I yield back my 3 seconds.
3 seconds. Thank you for every one of those. Thanks for joining us today. Senator Fetterman, I think you're not in the on-deck circle. You're up to bat, so you're recognized at this time. Go right ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of people aren't aware of this. In fact, I really wasn't either before I became a senator, and I was put on this committee. But there really is a street safety crisis in our country. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Senator, I would.
Yeah. Now, there are more than 7,000 pedestrian fatalities in 2022. Now, if you have a jet plane crashing every 20 days, so that would be on the news, but the other thing really doesn't seem to be covered as much. But now, and across Pennsylvania, there are countless stories about the community members being killed by walking or biking. The Biden administration has made a lot of progress on addressing this issue, but there are ways that we can all better reach all communities in expanding safer streets and trails. And my office is constantly hearing from mid-sized to smaller cities and towns like where I was mayor or I live for ideas to revitalize and building trails, sidewalks, and bike lanes. However, I'm concerned that there is a gap in funding for opportunities to support these kinds of 1 to 3 million projects. So, sir, do you believe that consider smalling applications for programs like this in the Neighborhood Access and Equity or Grant Active Transportation Infrastructure Improvement Program, is that a designated set aside needed?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your concern for vulnerable road users. One of the things I'm most proud of in my career is when I was the Secretary of Transportation in Delaware, we went from 31st to 4th in bicycle-friendly states in the nation. And yes, I think small communities getting small dollar grants can make a huge impact for safety.
Wow, did I get that right? You went from 31st to 4th?
In bicycle-friendly states under leadership of Governor Markell.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, come to Pennsylvania. But yeah, the FHWA has recommended a number of proven design features that would help us build safer routes and connect people walking to trail facilities and outdoor recreation, jobs, and services. Are some of those features still subject to the design exception process? What would an applicant need to do to get an exception and implement these proven safety features?
Thank you, Senator. So there are 28 proven safety countermeasures that our Office of Safety pushes. One of those is dedicated bike lanes, separated bike lane facilities, not just striping. What I have instructed our staff is if there is a safety issue that people want to try or experiment with, that we should err on the side of safety, not of caution. And so we're directing all those people to reach directly out to us, and we will work with our Office of Safety to expedite any exceptions that might be warranted.
Thank you. I think we can continue to work on getting resources to small communities and reducing red tape, which is why I introduced the Building Safer Streets Act. And as we evaluate the IIJA implementation, and what is needed is reauthorization. I hope to keep working with the FHWA and this committee on these needed reforms. I've also raised finalizing the public right-of-ways accessibility guidelines with the FHWA and the DOT. We passed Americans with Disabilities Act 34 years ago, and we still haven't finalized the standards that will ensure people with disabilities can safely walk and roll on sidewalks and crosswalks. So, Access Board finalized the PR PROAG on August 2021. When will the DOT adopt these accessibility standards and make sure POAG is enforceable, and what is causing the delay at the DOT?
Senator, I appreciate your leadership in this effort. Let me check with my staff and get the latest update. It's an interagency coordination, so I just want to make sure I'm getting you the right information.
Okay, and thank you. Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks for those questions, and thanks for joining. We've been joined by Senator Sullivan. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, good to see you again. I wanted to begin actually where Senator Fetterman was going. I think it's a really bipartisan issue. It relates to permitting reform. It's so important, right? And unfortunately, my state is often kind of the ground zero for groups that want to delay projects on infrastructure and sue just so they stop it. I always like to say Alaska's resource rich, but infrastructure poor. We have fewer road miles in Connecticut, and we're almost 120 times bigger than Connecticut. So we like infrastructure, and then when we have the opportunity to build it, we want to make sure it's built on time, on budget. As you know, in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we worked hard to codify the core elements of a one federal decision policy for transportation projects, including establishing a 2-year goal for completing EISs. Now, 2 years in my view is still too long, but relative to some of our other EISs, I think your confirmation hearing, I highlighted the Cooper Landing Bypass Project in Alaska. It took 40 years to complete that EIS. 40 years. Just crazy. Are you on track to meet this 2-year requirement for the EIS? And I'm looking at the chairman and ranking. That's the correct number, isn't it? 2 years? Yeah. It's really important, and it's now in the law.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And the ranking member has obviously shares your passion on this issue.
If she already asked the question, I'm sorry. But we care deeply about it. By the way, America cares. Democrats care. Republicans care. The only groups, in my view, that don't care are radical far-left environmental groups who don't want to build anything, and so they sue, game the system. You know, you and I have talked about this.
Senator, I'm a project delivery person, and we obviously want to follow the law. Or the Central Yosemite project in Denver, which is held up as a model, took us 12 years to get through NEPA.
Crazy. Well, Cooper Landing Bypass like triples that time.
Yeah.
40 years.
So what I did share with the ranking member, we are going to continue to work with our resource agencies. I will come back and get the exact accountability that we are asking for. I would love for all of them to hit that 2-year mark. I know we've got examples of projects that are being more expeditiously moved through the process, but I share your passion on this issue.
Okay. Let me turn to, we had literally a flap over the American flag over Memorial Day weekend in Denali National Park. Are you tracking any of that issue?
I am tracking it, Senator, yes.
Okay, so look, this is the Park Service, in my view, telling fibs to Alaskans, hey, we had nothing to do with this, and then 5 days later, they came out and essentially said, oh, actually, we did everything to do with it. I won't go into the details. It really made hundreds, if not thousands of Alaskans really upset that a federal agency was essentially telling an American, a patriotic American, you can't fly an American flag in a national park on your truck. Is there anything remotely in any federal contracts that you guys have that would require the removal of an American flag on a job site in a national park?
Senator,
I hope the answer is no.
Yeah.
I hope the answer is hell no.
The answer is no. I support...
hell no, then, maybe, from you?
Heck no.
Heck no.
Remember, be careful, this is a PG audience.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Heck no. Well, that suffices.
That's fiery language.
Okay. Heck no.
Yeah. I would just say this. I mean, I support wearing the American flag or flying the American flag at our work sites, and there is a American flag that has been at this work site ever since. Through my investigation into it, what I learned is there was a complaint about the flapping of the flag.
Yeah, whatever.
disturbing
I mean,
wildlife.
come on. That complaint should be,
I was just getting
no
into
offense,
the
it was,
details.
who cares, right? It's an American flag in a park by a patriotic worker. The complaint should have just been dismissed. Sorry, you don't like a flag flapping in the national park? Don't visit the park, right? Take your sensitivities elsewhere, right? That should have been the answer. It wasn't the answer by the National Park Service, but we're getting into that. Can you just assure me, Administrator, look, I'm a fan of yours. I think you're doing a good job, but that the National Park Service director said to me, hey, it may have been in the contract with the contractor, either with National Park Service or more likely with the contractor with you guys. My answer was, I can't imagine you guys put something in the contract that's a clear violation of the First Amendment, and let alone as unpatriotic as it gets. Could you just do a little scrub to make sure you guys aren't submitting contracts with American contractors that could remotely be read to tell them they can't fly the American flag?
Senator, I commit to you that there is no effort through the Federal Highway Administration to prevent the flying of American flags at work sites.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate it. And we have some additional record, something I'm going to submit on Alaska-related projects and permitting that we will submit for the record. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Senator Markley. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Administrator. Good to have you. And I want to get a better understanding. I apologize. I had other hearings going on, so you may have answered this question. But Back when we passed the infrastructure bill, the discussion was about building out 500,000 chargers, fast chargers across America. How many of those chargers have actually been deployed?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. The president has a goal of 500,000 charging ports by the end of the decade. There's 183,000 that are available today. The vast majority of those are from private sector deployments. That number is up 90% since the president took office. And of those, 6 states have begun deploying their NEVI funds. And then we have CFI and EV reliability, accessibility charger funds that are also putting out chargers.
All right, so I don't think you answered the question.
Nope, I'll happy to.
Yeah. The question was, the infrastructure bill funded 500,000, as you put it, charging ports. How many of those charging ports have been deployed?
So of the bipartisan infrastructure law
Yes.
funds, yes. So 6 states have deployed NEVI funds. I'll say it's dozens of ports, so under 100. Like of those 6 NEVI sites that are out there, it is dozens of charging ports. I can get you the specific number.
Okay, yeah, if you could, because I've heard it only 7. 7 out of 500,000.
7 sites, and then yes.
That is pathetic. Like, we're now 3 years into this. Now, if you come out to my state and you're looking to drive an electric vehicle around the state, even utilizing just those that are near the major highways, not a single one's been built. Not one. 3 years in, not one. What's the problem?
Well, thank you, Senator. And I share your frustration around the speed of the deployment here. I've been the administrator for 18 months. We have worked with every single state to develop their plans, both for NEVI, which is a charger every 50 miles along the NHS, and then also on CFI, which is more of the charging and fueling infrastructure deployments in cities. And so what is the problem? There's a number of problems. States have huge amounts of other programs that they're working with. We have stood up the regulations. There's Title 23 concerns. We're working through them on a state-by-state basis. But what I said in my opening statement is true. There are thousands of chargers that are going to come online this year. And we are on track to hit the president's goal of 500,000 charging ports before the end of the decade. So share your frustration on where we are today, but confident that we're going to hit the goal.
Yeah. Well, it is a big deal because you can't really depend upon an electric car if there's not a charging capability. And the fact that we passed this bill years ago and not one charging station has been built in my state, and only 7, as you put it, 7 sites around the country, that is a vast administrative failure. One of the points that was made previously was, well, all of this has been delayed by trying to work out a common standard for the charging stations to be deployed. Is it going to be a Tesla derivative common standard? Is that the reason that it's all been delayed so long?
Well, Senator, we work closely with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, who is the primary lead on this. That is one example of a challenge. So when we came out, there were like 6 or 7 different charging adapters that were out there. And so when you go spend billions of dollars on chargers, which one are you putting out there? That was a significant question. Now, because of the public investment, all of the manufacturers coalesced around the NACS charging standard. Now that is the one that is going forward. That is both on the charging side, on the vehicle manufacturing side. So it's not just the public sector side that needs to weigh in, and that's why we're working with the Joint Office on these.
All right. Well, I'm just trying to light a fire under this. This is an important part of the transition. And what it says to the public when you pass a bill that's going to fund 500,000 chargers and there's only 7 sites done 3 years later is something's terribly wrong. And it needs to be fixed. And it needs your intense attention. One piece of this is folks are like, well, at least we should have gotten charging stations done at the rest stops. But I don't think you've advocated for a change in federal law that would allow that to happen. Can you expand on that?
Senator, so I was in Colorado last week for an I-25 expansion event. One of the things they've done is they've got their park and ride that is there wired for chargers, but they are prohibited from charging at the rest area. And so that's obviously an issue that states are facing.
So have you proposed a solution?
I'm not aware that we've proposed a solution. I think we've just identified this as an issue.
Okay, so you've identified a problem, but you haven't proposed a solution. I suggest you actually get from identifying a problem to proposing a solution that Congress can take a look at. I think it would involve, quite simply, an exception for charging stations from the general law that says you can't have commercial activity at a rest stop. Isn't it that simple?
That would be one way to solve that problem.
Well, if you've got another way, bring it forward, or if that's the way to do it. Again, I'm trying to say that people become very cynical when a vision is laid out, a vision is finally passed by Congress, and then nothing gets done. Let's move more quickly.
Thank you, sir. The fire is lit.
Thank you.
Let me just say to Senator Merkley, the issue that we're talking about, you're raising here, has been discussed a good deal already today. And in terms of, with apologies to the door and Jose Feliciano, the idea of light my fire comes to mind. And we are, Senator Capito and I have already had some preliminary conversations about a hearing that focuses just on this. And we'd have the guy, this is not entirely, certainly not entirely Shailen Bhatt's responsibilities. It's a shared responsibility, as you know. And the states, I say this as a recovering governor, states have a responsibility here, and I want to make sure that they are part of this solution. Thank you.
Absolutely. And let's bring other key players in to solve this problem and try to knock down the obstacles that have slowed everything down.
Amen. Thank you. Senator Capito. Senator Capito.
Thank you. Thank you.
How about just giving us your opening statement?
Let me just follow up on this because I'm a little confused. When you say a site can have more than one port. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So the 500,000, is that ports or sites?
Ports.
Ports. Okay, so that's going to impact, it's not going to be 500,000 sites. I would just say, you said 178,000, I think, were already built, and they were mostly private sector. What does that tell you? Public sector, the private sector gets it done. And, so I think that's the direction that, I believe that was the direction we should have gone in the beginning. We didn't win on that because the private sector knows the answers here. I'll just leave it. That's just a statement because I do have something very happy, and you're going to love this. I have 3 interns here with me today, and I want to take an opportunity to, so you all wave when your name gets called. I have Sydney Magna from Fairmont, West Virginia. I have Kelsey Rees from Morgantown, West Virginia, and I have Ford Sutton from Charleston, West Virginia. So thank you all for helping out today and for coming to this hearing. So they travel West Virginia roads all the time. They love Corridor H. They want to see it completed. So if I could get them right up here, they would be. So you're going to come see me on Corridor H, and we're going to show you our bridges. And I wanted to give just some of the highlights of my opening statement, just to get on the record. Certainly proud of the bipartisanship that we had at the IIJA, and showed that we can work together and really, I think, achieve good results. Some of the implementations come into focus, and we've had some testimony to that. And we've seen how the formula funding really is benefiting certainly my state of West Virginia. And that's why I was so adamant that 90% of the funding provided by this committee through the IIJA needed to be that formula funding. And I know you understand that probably better than all of us sitting up here, having been the implementer. We have already discussed that discretionary grants are a universal point of concern for our stakeholders. There's too many strings. It's taking too long to get these out the door. And these timeline delays, we've talked about the inflationary costs of construction, and obviously this is going to be impacted. And then that's when we get to this August redistribution thing. My understanding is the large driver of those increases is the TIFIA program. And so given that, let me just stop here and ask you to confirm this, that the discretionary grants, this August redistribution is caused by not getting the discretionary grants out on time, and also the TIFIA. Those are the major drivers of the August redistribution?
Yes, Ranking Member,
Okay.
Primarily.
Primarily. So those are the two things I'm concerned about. I am concerned by the proposal, including in this 2025 budget, that would transfer $800 million of Highway Trust Fund contract authority from TIFIA to 2 discretionary grant programs when we're having trouble already getting the discretionary dollars out. I look forward to the efforts to speed this up. This discretionary grant process time is definitely ticking, and I'm concerned about that. I think you know my feelings on joining with Senator Kramer, the Congressional Review Act on the greenhouse gas. I said repeatedly, talked to Secretary Buttigieg about this. We debated this vigorously as we were writing this bill. It was not included in our bill intentionally because we negotiated it out. And, you know, sometimes you win, you lose in negotiations. That one lost. And I do think that the Senate spoke here, and I don't think that the FHWA has that authority. And so we're now in the courts to figure out exactly how far the department has gone in that. So I think we're cooking along here pretty well. Obviously, I think we've highlighted some problems that you're aware of, that we want to have congressional, because the intent in the bill was to have one federal decision working properly and expeditiously, to have the dollars going out. We're going to be to have these EV charging stations. These are just some of the things I think that my fellow members have brought. So you're coming this summer, hopefully, and we'll get together and show you wild and wonderful West Virginia. And we will also show you, have our stakeholders in to talk about more deeply some of the issues that we see as we try to tackle the difficult challenges of building infrastructure in these inflationary times. I thank you. Your office is always, and you personally, very open, very transparent, very much appreciated from this senator from West Virginia. Thank you.
And as a native West Virginia, this senator approves that message. All right, thank you, Senator Capito, for everything. I have one more question, Shaylin, to ask, and then we'll wrap it up, I think. A question on low carbon construction materials. In the Inflation Reduction Act, this committee established, as you may recall, the Low Carbon Transportation Materials Grant Program to incentivize the use of lower emitting construction materials on highway projects. Reducing the emissions associated with the construction of our highways, of our bridges, is an important part of reducing the industrial emissions that are a major driver of climate change, as you know. I was pleased to see the Federal Highway Administration release a request for applications for the program in March. And my question is this: how is the Federal Highway Administration working with states and the private sector to help them take advantage of this grant opportunity?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've actually been very pleased with the amount of interest, both from states and from private sector partners. Obviously, we had to work with the EPA to figure out what are the actual materials that would qualify. It's obviously incremental costs that are supported. And so because of some of those challenges, we thought we weren't sure what the interest would be. A lot of interest that is out there, and we are very excited about the potential to reduce carbon on the construction side.
Yeah, what are the next steps for this program now that the request for applications has been publicly released?
So thank you, Chairman. The next steps would be for us to finalize those applications that qualify, and then to work to get those dollars flowing.
All right, good, thank you. Before I thank you for appearing before us today, I want to again thank the folks that serve with you in the Federal Highway Administration for the work that they do. And we express our thanks to your family for sharing you with the people of Delaware, Colorado, Kentucky, and now the country. As Senator Capito has acknowledged, for really doing a very, very good job in this role. It's not an easy role, but we're grateful for the way you attack it every day. I Want to just come back to a couple of issues that bear following up. I like to use the term shared responsibility a lot. And some of the issues that we talked about here, in fact, a lot of them, they're shared responsibilities. We have a responsibility in this. The legislative branch of Congress, administration has a responsibility. State and local governments have responsibilities. The private sector has a responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. I remember I used to go to the Detroit Auto Show. Delaware, you'll recall, used to have a Chrysler plant, big Chrysler plant in Newark, Delaware. I think we had 3,000 or 4,000 people working there. We had about another 3,000 people working at the General Motors plant in Newport, Delaware. Today, we have neither of those. They all closed in the Great Recession, and we lost all of those jobs. I used to go to the Detroit Auto Show. One of the people I met at the Detroit Auto Show about 10 years ago was a woman named Mary Barra, who went on to become and is the CEO, as you may recall, of General Motors. I remember the year that Chevrolet Volt was recognized and won the award as the car of the year, and it was a hybrid, and it got 38 miles on a charge. 38 miles on a charge. The electric vehicle I have gets 300 miles on a charge, and the ones that are coming off the assembly line trucks and cars are going to do a whole lot more than that going forward. The Senator Capito and I just some very preliminary conversations this morning about a hearing that actually looks beyond what we're discussing today, but we're interested in the deployment of charging stations. We want to make sure that federal money that we've allocated is being used for the right purposes, and that state and local governments and others are doing their fair share too. I want to come back to pay for, and I mentioned earlier that things that are worth paying for. One of the nice things about electric vehicles is they don't pollute, and that's a good thing. The other thing is the folks who use electric vehicles, like mine, we don't pay for the money going to the Federal Highway Trust Fund or the State Highway Trust Funds, which are mostly driven by taxes on gasoline and fuel, as you know. That's just not right. You know, we have an obligation in terms of a shared responsibility to help pay for this infrastructure, and in many instances, we're not doing that. Some states have figured out how to address that, but it's a problem, and it needs to be addressed. Let me see if I have anything else. I don't think so. Anything else?
good.
Okay. I want to give you the last word. Now, just go ahead. Just the last couple of comments that you'd like to look in. You've been badgered here for a couple of hours, and you take very seriously your responsibilities. But just give us a couple of closing thoughts, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, Senator Capito. Thank you for introducing the interns. I wasn't sure who these three high-powered people were sitting over here, and I was concerned that they might be, somebody I needed to recognize. I just, whether it's the 8-year-old boy that I met at one of those projects or your granddaughter and her leadership, I think that one of the things that I'm just so hopeful about for our country is that, particularly on areas where we can find bipartisan compromise and not get too out to the fringes and extremes that seem to be consuming a lot of our conversations, I'm just really grateful for this space. You call it badgering, I call it, energetic and enthusiastic follow-up for things people care about. But I feel like there is some positive, hopefully, that we can share with others in the country to bring us back together. Thank you for recognizing the almost 3,000 members of Federal Highways. Lots of people work nights, weekends. And the bipartisan infrastructure law has been both a blessing and a curse for some people, right? It's a massive amount of work. I'm sure your staffs understand that. But there are projects in this country, despite the inflation, that are going to be moved forward that never would have been possible. And so, it's a hard job. These are hard jobs, but we're helping to build a better country, and what else could be better than that? So thank you for your leadership, and look forward to continuing to work together.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. One of the things that I most enjoy in my service is state treasurer, congressman, governor, senator, and before that in the Navy. One of the things I really have gotten a lot of pleasure from is we don't create jobs. in government, at the state level, local level, the federal. We don't create jobs, but we help create a nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation, and that's what when we focused on the legislation that we've been talking about here today, that's in large part to create that nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation, and hopefully to provide for an environment, where we can be safe and live a lot longer and healthy lives for our children and grandchildren. So that's all. It's all something that is on my mind and continues to be on my mind for as long as I have the privilege of sitting here. Yes, please.
Well, sir, I don't know how many more times I'll come before this committee before your time as chairman ends. And I just, as I said at the train station in Delaware, there are roads, bridges, rail, dam, infrastructure that is across the nation that is just thanks to your hard work. So as a native son of West Virginia, you have done the nation proud. And I just want to express all of our gratitude from U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highways.
You're kind to
all of
say
your
that.
leadership.
The day that President Biden signed the bipartisan infrastructure law into law on the White House lawn, Senator Capito and I and Senator Manchin, three kids from West Virginia that somehow ended up in the United States Senate and had the chance to collaborate on this legislation. What a thrill that was, and what a source of joy for all of us. Okay, again, thanks for your testimony. Thanks very much for your diligence and the leadership that you provided, Federal Highway Administration. With that, a couple of things on for the housekeeping side before we close our hearing. Senators will be allowed to submit questions for the record through the close of business on Thursday, June 20th, 2024. We'll compile those questions and send them to our witness and ask our witnesses to reply by what's it, July 3rd. Anything else, Senator Capito? No. With that, our thanks to our staffs who work so hard and collaborate and work very well together. I'm grateful to all of you. With that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you so much.